Morning, guys. I'm David. I'm an alcoholic. The first year of my life, before I was 1 year old, I wouldn't stop crying. At 11 months, my parents were absolutely beside themselves. My mother told me she threw me on the bed at one stage. "What is wrong with you?" And she tossed me because I just wouldn't stop in the night, in the day. And my folks were beside themselves, and there was this person who tied a string around their big toe and tied it to my rocker. And in the night, when everyone was trying to sleep, I would, whine or whatever, and they'd wiggle their toe, and I kind of calmed down, kind of giving me that sense of like a comforting presence around. Maybe someone should have said, "No, don't worry, he's just an alcoholic." Maybe they should have said, "Oh, worry, he's an alcoholic." Page 124 of the big book says, "Cling to the thought that your dark past is the greatest possession that you have. With it, it is the key to averting death, or it is the key to happiness and joy for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them." Now, as I go through my share, if you could just keep in mind the theme of obedience and rebellion. Bear those two themes in mind as I move through my share. I was a very, very angry person, very angry, and obedience. I kind of look back at my life, and the whole thing around obedience, kind of led to a lot of that anger, and a rebellion. So it was the cause of the anger, and the rebellion was the acting out of the result of the anger. I was born in Harare, Zimbabwe, Salisbury, Rhodesia at the time. To a very loving family. I lived a very privileged childhood. I was the oldest of 4 siblings, a sister a year younger than me and 2 younger brothers, 7 and 8 years younger than me. I was given a really brilliant education. At 6 years old, I went overseas with my parents. My father went there on work, and I kind of felt myself in a foreign place, with all these kids with different accents, very kind of separate and apart. I was always very afraid, a lot of kind of fear and anxiety. And when I was over in England, the teacher read to us the Pied Piper of Hamelin and asked us, the class, to write a summary of the story. And all the kids wrote their summary, and they kept it to about a page. But I wrote 7 pages. And now looking back, it's kind of like, it has to do with the detail of my mind. I want to make sure that everything is right. It's very perfectionistic, that I've got the information right, I've taken it in right, I've given it back right, that it makes sense, because it gives me kind of that sense of control. It not being right, I'm not good enough, or I've made a mistake. Anyway, I had a really great childhood. I got a lot of approval in my childhood. Grade 7, I was a prefect. I was captain of all the sports teams: cricket, rugby, tennis, squash. Kind of got the most Valentine's cards at school from the girls, and I had my heart set on the leadership in sports and service to the school awards. Didn't know I'd get them, but I got them, so there was a lot of approval and a lot of affirmation, and I was, I felt good, and I was okay, and I was, but in grade 7, moving into high school, there were 2 high schools that I wrote entrance exams for, and my father wanted me to go to the school that was just around the corner from us, where we lived. I wanted to go to the school, the more prestigious school, which was 8 kilometers away. I wrote an entrance exam to both. The one my father wanted to go to, I actually got a scholarship for. One of 3 guys in the country who got a scholarship to go to that school. But I had my heart set on the more prestigious old school where almost all my friends were going. And I said, no, Dad, I'm going to this school, kind of asserting myself. He manipulated me into saying, well, okay, that's fine, but if you go to, either way you're riding. Either way you're going to ride to school. So you want to ride 8 k's a day and back, then you do that. He was driving straight past that school that I rode to school every day. He could have dropped me off. And that was the start of where I started to get sick. I rode to school every single day, just building this resentment. And kind of looking back, and it was kind of like I saw it as a punishment for being assertive, in a sense. Moving into high school, I was no longer the big fish in a small pond. I was a small fish in a big pond, and very afraid of authority figures. Always been very afraid of authority figures, and I used to stay up at the classrooms. I wouldn't go past the tuck shop onto the fields in case the seniors would call me out and bully me, like they did other people. So I stayed alone, separate and apart, and it wasn't easy. I suffered some bullying at school as well, but for the most part, it was okay. And as I got older, it became easier because I became more senior, and life went on. But at the age of 16, I started to drink. And I also smoked, the green stuff. And it was a kind of a rebellion, My mother and father kind of said, don't ever take drugs. But it was a type of rebellion, and it was stuff them. And I started getting into that at that early age. The last year of high school, I met a girl, and we fell in love. In infatuation, I needed to leave school and go to university, and my father had said to me, you need to think about ending this because you're going off in your life now, and it's a suggestion on my behalf, just end this. She wasn't having any of it. And because my father had had an affair when I first got into high school, which caused immense damage and hurt to my mom and to us as a family, I swore I would never be like him, and that going away, I would be loyal to my girlfriend, and I would never be like my father and have those affairs and hurt the people I loved. So off I went to university. I got a job at the Spur, saving money to phone her twice a week, to keep in touch. As it turns out, our relationship lasted 5 years, and 1 year into being overseas, after I finished university, she broke up with me, kind of out of nowhere. There wasn't anything in particular. I just didn't see it coming, and I was very kind of hurt. I felt very, very betrayed. And what was kind of even worse was that my sister ended up marrying her brother, and that they live in the house that I used to go and visit my girlfriend at, and my folks live on the same property now. So I'm kind of ever tied to this first love, university, I worked very hard and I played hard. I only missed 7 lectures in my first year. And I partied hard. I drank an incredible amount. I remember at the end of high school, going to nightclubs and stuff, saying, my mother would say, David, why don't you eat something? Why don't you eat something? Have something to eat before you go out and whatever. I said, no, I'm not that hungry. I was hungry, but I knew the alcohol was coming, and I knew that, eating would kind of delay the effect of the alcohol. And you don't really need to go any further than that. If you can relate to that, there's your problem. There's the problem, right there. Don't need to go any further. I finished university, and I went back to Zimbabwe and decided to go overseas. I spent 2 years overseas. Had a great time overseas, except this girlfriend kind of broke up with me. The drinking continued, just on kind of weekends, and lots of parties, and we had a good time. But when this woman broke up with me, my ego was kind of so hit. I jumped into a relationship with another woman. Didn't allow myself to fall for her. I used her at the end of the day. We had a great time, and we traveled Europe. And after 2 years, when I left England to come back to Zimbabwe, she went to Australia. She fell for me, and I had still had my mind set on getting this first love back, but she fell for me. And funnily enough, 9 years later, when she heard about my divorce, she got in touch with me on Facebook, implying, you see, you should have chosen me. And it was then that I realized, just how much, she had kind of enjoyed my company. But anyway, moving on, I came back to Zimbabwe, and my father had said to me, when you go to university, do a BCom. You're going to do a BCom. I wanted to do social sciences. I wanted to do psychology. But he said, no, do a BCom. Just get your foundation in commerce, and you can do whatever you want after that. Coming back to England, coming back to Zimbabwe, he kind of pulled me into his line of work. He said, I was on a 100-meter sprint in the starting blocks, ready to go and get everything that I thought I needed to be happy. To achieve, to earn a lot of money, to get the big house, to get the wife and the kids, and all that story. I had thought about, I want to really do psychology, but because I was in this hurry to kind of get, I thought, doing another degree, studying now, kind of too lazy, and who would pay for it? Kind of easier, softer way. And I also looked at kind of the prestige of following my father's line of work in terms of the big names in management consulting, which is what he was into. Anyway, so I got into that line of work, and he said, Zimbabwe was going through a tough time at the moment, and they closed down the offices in Harare, and the offices in Johannesburg offered for us to go and move to Johannesburg. Now, at that time, I had met my future wife. She had batted her eyelids at me, and we had huge amounts of fun together. But she wanted to go overseas, so she ended up going overseas, and I came to Johannesburg. I had dual citizenship. I put all my stuff in my car and drove over the border and never looked back. And jeepers, it was tough in the line of work that I did. There was a lot of pressure, high stress working environments, a lot of information, very steep learning curves. Every client is a different scenario, and you've got to kind of figure out for yourself, what you're trying to do. No one's there to kind of teach you, and I found that very tough and very crippling. And there wasn't a lot of reward, either. So it was very hard work. And I remember kind of being in South Africa after about a year or two, and the one colleague of me saying, commented to me, it's an angry Dave, at that time, in 2003, my future wife would come and join me in Johannesburg, and we bought our first flat, and I bought a second flat, and we enjoyed our time, and we didn't have much, but life was good. It was tough work-wise in Johannesburg, but it was good. In 2005 was the big turning point. That was the start of the nightmare, because 4 big things happened in 2005, involving a lot of change. My grandmother died in June. I was very close to her. We sold our flat and bought our first small house, and with the proceeds as well, we paid for our wedding. That was in July we moved. In September we got married, and in November I changed job. At the end of that year, changing job, all of that change was kind of like too much for me. And I got put into a job where I was absolutely overwhelmed. It was way above my caliber to deliver on, and I had these kind of severe anxiety attacks, these panic attacks, and I was phoning my father, like, hyperventilating, calm down, and what the hell's wrong with you? Went to the doctor, and in January 2006 got put onto medication. And my weight shot up from being 89 in 2005 at my wedding to over 100 kgs. Also, what happened is that this side of my wife kind of came out that I'd never seen before. I'd been with her for about 4 years before we got married, and this kind of side of her came out that I could not do any right for some reason in the first 2 years of our marriage. She henpicked me about the smallest things, and it kind of drove me crazy. And what I've realized in recovery is that, as neurotic as she was, and as henpicky as she was, because we power struggled, the point is that those things were important to her. They mattered to her, but I couldn't see that at the time. Anyway, life carried on, and things got worse in our marriage. In 2007, I asked the Deloitte helpline for a psychologist to help us with our marriage, and we started seeing this guy, but my wife stopped seeing him and I carried on seeing him. Kind of go figure. My wife also insisted that we move from our small house into a bigger house in the same road, because she wasn't going to have our firstborn in the small house. I didn't assert myself. I didn't see any reason why we needed to move, but she wanted the bigger, grander home, and I kind of justified it. I thought it made sense because it would accommodate her and my folks who would come to visit often in Joburg, and it was a good investment and all that kind of jargon and some rationale about when you invest in a home, your dream home, make yourself be stretched financially, because it only gets easier. It doesn't. Kids come along. I didn't see that. But anyway, so I didn't kind of dig my heels in and assert myself. I was people pleasing. I people pleased her, and I went and bought this bigger home. Put huge financial strain on us. My daughter was born in 2008, and that was wonderful. I loved my children. My children were kind of like, they were the center of our lives, and they just brought this magic into our lives, and it was wonderful. But in 2010, after 10 years in management consulting, our second child, Joshua, was going to be born in December, and I needed to make more money. And I was at a point where I was a senior consultant at Deloitte, up for promotion to manager, but I was working so hard, and my mind was so full, and the kind of the stress and the pressure, and I was for very little reward, because they don't pay well. And I took an easier, softer way out, and moved to corporate, take my experience, get paid a lot more money, slow down a bit, take things a little bit more easier, make life easier. Huge amount of defects in there, and one of the worst decisions that I ever made, because I moved from a frying pan into a fire, into a company that was very broken. They ruled in this culture of fear, and when I say broken, I mean I was one of 3 account managers that almost the whole company revolved around. Everything was the account manager's problem. Incredibly steep learning curves, totally different to management consulting. I didn't understand I needed to get into the detail, 30, 40, 50 emails a day, trying to reply to each one, having to think about the response to each one, because it has to do with electronic procurement and suppliers not getting their goods on time, or suppliers not being able to deliver on time, and buyers not getting their stuff on time. So it mattered, and it was big stuff. And it was a horrendous environment. I would run from meeting room to meeting room at times, meeting after meeting after meeting, completely and utterly overwhelmed. Not showing it, but being a mess when I got home, and when I called my wife, being short and sharp with her, because I felt like I was under so much pressure. And I remember them. It was, I would wake up in the morning and just kind of sit bolt upright, and first thing in the morning, and there'd be thousands of thoughts kind of streaming, and my wife would say to me, just calm down, take it slow, kind of calm down. And I couldn't eat breakfast, my mouth was too dry, I drove recklessly to work, I was in a big mess. 12 weeks into that job, I wasn't functioning properly, and went to the psychiatrist, and he said, geez man, it seems like you're suffering from some sort of annihilation anxiety. Originally they'd prescribed me as OCD. He's got OCD, here are the meds, annihilation anxiety, annihilation, to be completely wiped out, separate and apart and alone from everything, to work kind of like the definition of annihilation. But I persevered in that job, and I started to get in control. I was popular in that environment, and people liked me, but I was hugely angry and resentful at the two people who ran that company, their manipulation and their fear tactics, and that kind of came out, and they caught wind of that. I wasn't drinking at that time. I was just on meds, but 2 years into it, once I started to get kind of in control and kind of feel like I was in control, I started to drink again. And I had an altercation with my wife, and I went out, and I got angry with her, and I went and I got drunk, and I got hit, and I got knocked out, and I went into ICU, and it was at that point that my best friend, who I'd taken to rehab 2 years before, and who had got me onto the green stuff at the age of 16, he came to my bedside, step 12ing, didn't know he was doing it, and he said, man, listen, it only gets worse. Go to this place, and you can just take it out, take some time out from life. So I went to this place, and it was my first rehab, and I was there for 6 weeks, taking some time out. When I left and I got back to this work environment, very, very odd things kind of happened, and it was strange. Everybody was avoiding me. There was all these kind of, I didn't know what was going on, and it was corporate politics. And to cut a long story short, I was manipulated, well, not manipulated, they used my fear to get me to be dishonest in an email to a client about a meeting time change, half an hour late to meeting time change. And if I'd known at that time that as alcoholics in recovery, we are held to the very highest standards, I would never have made that mistake, and I would never have been managed out. But it wasn't meant to be like that. It was meant to be the fact that I got managed out, because I ended up getting fired. They tried to manipulate me into signing something that would give me some money, but I refused. And in refusing and getting no money and going through the disciplinary process and taking it to the CCMA, the regional vice president lost his job. When I went for the internal disciplinary hearing, they said, it's good to have you back, David. Well done. The tea lady made me tea. Hi, David. And the HR guy said, by the way, the regional vice president's leaving us. He had been fired. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I left there, and I started to, in that time, I started to develop a paranoia, because I came across information where, I thought my life was at risk and I was in danger, and I was playing with very dangerous people, and and I developed this paranoia, and I started to link things in my mind and do this kind of linking, and I got put onto some mild kind of antipsychotics at the time. Some of the stuff was true, but some of the stuff wasn't true. I'd been told, you're going to, because a new lady came in at the time and she said, you're going to be the new face of this company. I don't know what she kind of meant. But anyway, the politics played out, and 2 months later, I'd heard that the lady who was my boss after the regional vice president got fired, she had handed in her resignation, and I got a phone call saying, David, she's handed in her resignation. I said, well, I've been fired. And they said, well, so I said, who's going to take over? I said, well, you. And I was like, I've been fired. 4 months later, heard that she had been appointed. She's now Europe, Middle East, Africa, head of customer service organization for global organization, doing her stuff. And I'm at John Dory's as a writer. And I'd love to be at John Dory's. I prefer John Dory's. Just trying to get a sense of the time, yeah? Okay, not much longer. Okay, let me move on. I've got to speed this up a bit. I then got a job at SAB. God had a sense of humor. South African breweries. 2 years there. But in 2013, after being there 6 months, I bought my first kind of big car. I went out one night after having a fight with my wife, got drunk, came home. She had locked me out the house with her mother-in-law. Went back out, got something to eat because I was hungry. Came home, and on my way home, put the car into a wall. Went to AA. They said, you got to face the music. You did defraud a company out of 300,000 rand for a car you crashed because you were drunk. I had taken the case up to the ombudsman because insurance didn't want to pay, and I then dropped the case with the ombudsman because I was actually afraid that they might have somehow found out that I had been drinking. They took no bloods. My phone was at home. They couldn't track me. They had no evidence. But I did the right thing, so to say, and I dropped the case with the ombudsman and had to pay 6,000 rand a month for the next 5.5 years for a car I couldn't drive. That was the thing that ended my marriage. Doing the right thing. It's funny how it works. But I didn't know that in June 2013 until at the end of 2014. My wife had made up her mind a year before. She started seeing other guys, dating behind my back. I'd caught her once doing that. I was still in kind of denial, and I kind of carried on. But when she asked me at the end of 2014 for a divorce, I remembered, it was getting hostile between us in front of our children, and it was for the children that I needed to do the right thing and accept the divorce, and also for her own happiness. I remember the sponsoring thought saying, she doesn't want this anymore, and I've got to let her go away. So that's what we did. But I was very, very angry, and that's when the rebellion kicked in 2015. I said, if I'm going to be an alcoholic, or an addict, I'm going to go and find out what it's like to be that. And I got into the dirty street drugs. It was the worst decision I could have made. I ended up going to my next treatment center at the end of 2014 when I got asked for the divorce. I was there for 3 weeks, living in a sober house, but relapsing and getting into the dirty drugs. And in 2015, my job at SAB came to an end. My 2-year contract wasn't renewed. I was out of work. So I was very anxious in terms of trying to find work, and got another job back with Deloitte. But 3 weeks into that job, completely and utterly overwhelmed again. Put on a job out of my caliber, and it was a repeat of the first time I joined Deloitte, and I didn't want that to happen again. And I handed in my resignation. And needing work so badly, but just not being able to do it, handed in my resignation. My psychiatrist said, there's a big problem here. He needs to go to a clinic. And so my folks towards the end of 2015 took me to Cape Town, to a clinic, and diagnosed with severe clinical depression. and I was just so angry. But that's what it does. You don't want to lash out. You get depressed. It suppresses you so that you don't hurt yourself or you hurt other people. It's supposed to happen. So that happened, and then after that, I came back to Joburg, managed to get some part-time work, and in 2016, I didn't drink, and I didn't use. I was going to relapse prevention therapy. I was going to AA, but I was in enormous amounts of pain, and I, at the end of the year, it's kind of got too hard. I wasn't in recovery. I wasn't working a program. I was on a lot of meds. I was trying, but it was just, at the end, at the Christmas party, it just got too hard, and I relapsed, and I took the last 120,000 rand that I had in my child's education fund, and I blew it on myself, on alcohol, on drugs, on the ladies of the night, and it wasn't so much a sense of lusting after that stuff. It was more to kind of numb the pain, and I just needed to kind of keep going, and I just wanted to numb everything and to somehow kind of just keep going. In 2017, I would spend Wednesdays and Saturdays with my children. I would do a lot with them. I'd doing things that fathers do with them, trying not to show my discomfort, trying to give them a good time, reading stories to them at night in their beds. And the one time I came home and I put 2-day-old socks on, and my feet stank, and my daughter went, "Dad, sis, man, your feet smell." And they went and got a bucket of water and they washed my feet. And I was in this pain. The night also came when I left the house for the first time. They ran upstairs when I left the house for the last time, living in the house with my wife for the very last time. They ran upstairs and they were kind of beside themselves, and their little hands and foreheads on the windows. "Dad, Daddy, bye, Dad." I did that to them. Leaving them for the last time. I did that to them. Their confusion, their pain. Where's Dad going? But 2017, I also joined Lifeline. I knew from the fellowship about trying to help others, and I joined Lifeline, and I tried to get into something to occupy myself, to take this feeling away, and it was my life that I needed to save. It wasn't anybody else's at the time. But how much time am I going? 5 minutes. Okay. To cut a long story short, I arrived at the house on the hill in May last year in a terrible place in my mind. I held on to the one idea, the famous sportsman who every time he hit the grass, his mantra was "get up, just get up." Soon that became getting on your knees to welcome the day. So it was "get up, get down," and then it was kind of "just get down." But he wore a 7 on his back, and it was my seventh clinic, my 7th treatment center. I hung on to that. I was put onto a ban for being in my room. I would isolate for the first 2 weeks. 2 weeks I was on a ban. I wasn't allowed to isolate, and I was rigorously honest. And I kept myself on that ban for 13 weeks because I knew if I took myself off it, and I was allowed to be off it, I'd go straight back to my room. So I kept myself on it. I did the step work. I did the steps. And it was my harbor in the tempest. What worked for me so beautifully was that it married spirituality, which was I was very into from 2002 with the steps, and I could finally see it, and I worked as hard as I could. It was very, very difficult, but I worked as hard as I could, and things became so much more clear to me, and I left there after 6 months, and you know, it's been so much fun in this first year of recovery. My sponsor said, you've got to have a lot of fun. You know, I've done what I've been told to do, and I was told to get a job. I got a job, then I didn't like the job and was told what to do. The guy fired me. I got released from the job because I was told what to do. Got another job, or didn't get another job. I was told to sponsor or to volunteer, and I went and I volunteered, and then it hit me. There was this book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, a story of homecoming. And it was no mistakes in God's world, because I read that book, and my own spiritual awakening suddenly jumped a huge leap forward. My whole life, everything became so crystal clear. It was unbelievable. It's a beautiful book, almost as beautiful as the big book, but very clear. Suddenly I could see that up to 2015, now there are three main characters in the book, and it's centered around Rembrandt's painting of The Return of the Prodigal Son, where there's this prodigal son on his knees against the father's chest, and the father's got both his hands on the shoulder, and the older brother, this cold kind of anger to the side, looking upon this story. And you know, I could see for myself that up to 2015, I had the role of the brother. Every human being actually is called to realize that they have all three roles and that they've played all three roles. And up to 2015, I related directly with the brother. I had been obedient. I had done what my father had told me to do. I had tried to not hurt people. I had gone and got the jobs and not betrayed the girlfriend and whatever. And I couldn't understand why I'd lost everything, having done this. And the author puts it that arguably, you know, it's very, very difficult to see your part when you're in the role of the brother, to find your way back home. Way back home for me is AA, the house of my father, where you are accepted unconditionally. I became the prodigal in 2015. I went out, I blew everything I had. I was very angry, in a lot of pain, and I blew everything. Went after the ladies of the night just to kind of kill the pain, not so much a lust. Went to a distant country in the end, from Zimbabwe to South Africa, to go and get. And I kind of saw that very clearly for myself. And in AA, I realized how we're called actually to be the role of the father, where it doesn't matter what you've done. We're here to help you at any cost. We don't have to like you, but we've got to try and love you. And you know, in my mind, I see myself on my knees in that office up on the hill, in the hands of Caleb and Natalie and Stelio and Keith and Don and this guy on my back against the chest with a kind of like a childlike face, in complete and utter surrender and complete and utter trust. I can't do this anymore. And so there's blind, absolute obedience to your sponsor. Obedience in recovery, but not obedience from the sense of getting worked up about having to do the things that you have to do. You shit yourself so much if you don't do it. You know, you're happy to do it and you get on with it. You know, that kind of thing. And I've learned also, you know, the pathway to compassion is a very, very deep grief and a forgiveness, self-forgiveness mainly, and generosity. You know, old-timers understand that. They understand compassion. They understand the generosity part. You know, men and women, old-timers who reach very deep into their own pockets when they can, and if it makes sense, and for the time being, to allow other people who have the illness to give them the space and time to save themselves. And, you know, I'm forever grateful. So that's kind of about it. But I remember that person that used to tie the string around their toe when I was before I was 1 year old. That person was my dad. So you don't stop believing. Thanks for letting me share.